This is CD2 in the CD set called Maltese Voices Down Under. This CD has the theme of the voyage to Australia. You will hear voices of migrants who came to Australia from Malta by ship from 1916 and the 1920s, 1940s up to 1958.
Everybody that come to Australia, unless they got people here, they know where they going. I think they all booked to Sydney. And, I certainly booked to Sydney myself, because Sydney it was well known. A lot of people didn't know. Well, I was one that I didn't know anything about Fremantle. You see, I didn't know about Brisbane either, but I knew about Queensland, you see, because when I went to school I used to read the geography and read about different places, and they even used to tell us what they grow and when you learn geography. Yeah, and I kept remember all those things.
What did you say to your mother and your brother when you left Malta?
I just simply said, Mum, some more. That's the only thing. Coming from the church, I met her there, and she was sobbing before, because she knew I was going, and she was sobbing before she grabbed me.
Could you tell me what it was like on the Gange?
Well, the people, the passengers, seemed to be very happy going along, but for meals we were rather treated not so good. I always thought about the money we paid. You see, if we were on one of the Orient line or the P&O line, we would have to pay at least double the money, around £40, I suppose, something like that, you see. Well, I think you will get better treatment than what we had. It was rather an ordeal trip, but we got there without any trouble at all. I mean, we didn't cause any riot for we wanted something and they wouldn't give it or anything like that.
What was the sleeping accommodation?
What was hammocks hanging down, and you get into them. You could get better bed.
Tell me about the food as well.
The food, generally spaghetti or macaroni and so on. But it wasn't very startling, but I don't think there was anybody hungry or anything like that. Out of all the Maltese on the ship, there was only one man. He was in Australia before, and he had his brother with him, and he used to dine with the other people, with the passengers and the soldiers, the few French soldiers. And there was other passengers on the way to New Caledonia. They dined first and we follow after.
What did you do on the ship during the day on the ship?
Oh, there's nothing. We can't do anything on the ship. No, nothing at all. Some of the passengers, they used to kill their bulls there for food, you see. And this man that was in Sydney Boyard, I think is his name, used to go and help him killing the bull. Yeah.
Did you mix with the other passengers?
Not very much. The other passenger had on a higher deck, you see. Our hammocks were down below. And when we get on the deck, we on what they call the main deck. And the other passenger and the soldiers and so on, they had one higher up, and they had the hospital on that deck as well.
When you got on the ship, did you have any belief that you would not be allowed into Australia?
When we got on the ship, we had no idea of that, nothing. Everybody thought we were going there and have no trouble because we had the visors and it shouldn't be any trouble. But the trouble come along because of the soldiers were going away, and there was the White Australia policy, and there was the religion business in it. No good deny that, I know that. And that carried on. Even today there is some of it too yet, but today it's not so bad.
Was anyone sick on the trip from Malta to Fremantle?
I think there was different times somebody have to see the doctor, but there was no real illness, bad illness that I know of.
Could you tell me about the man who died, please?
Well, he was getting sick, seasick, just about every day. And I didn't know much about that, really. But then, when he got bad, taken into hospital, I heard about him, and they said he's likely to die. And he did die, and he was buried there. It was a perfect day on that day, and it was just like a piece of wood, no movement at all. And they brought the coffin, put it on the edge of the ship, on the side of the ship. Some member of the crew read the funeral notice, raised the lever, and the coffin went down, slipped down into the water.
We left our dear country, the island of Malta. We left our dear history, our family and friend. We suffered the hardship, we journeyed in danger to come to Australia, the vast lucky land. We carried the passport of the British Crown. They called us their subjects, but soon let us down. Our protectors soon let us down. The First World War raging, and many Australians were being conscripted to fight overseas. The Unions discovered that from this small island the Gange was approaching with a load of Maltese. They threatened the government with strikes and disruptions, to schemes of conscription, and argued and raged. They scared Mr. Hughes when they falsely accused us and called us black laborers who toil for cheap wage. We carried the passport of the British Crown. They called us their subjects, but soon let us down. Our protectors soon let We were all denied rights of disembarkation. Wherever we tried, the plain answer was no. A few of the brave ones jumped ship but were captured and treated as criminals, no farther to go. We were all examined in a strange foreign language. We were locked away in a half-guarded well. We were denied justice and legal protection. We were the poor victims who suffered in hell. We carried the passport of the British Crown. They called us their subjects, but soon let us down. Our protectors soon let us down. Our families in Malta were anxious and waiting for news of the loved ones and money to live. Oh, surely Australia, the vast lucky country, to friends long established, had plenty to give. They shipped us as livestock on old cargo vessels in New Caledonia. For weeks were detained. They made all arrangements to return us to Malta, but that was outrageous, all our friends complained. We carried the passport of the British Crown. They called us their subjects, but soon let us down. Our protectors soon let us down. There were the good soldiers of Gange in Malta, were treated as friends and were grateful indeed. There were those who justly regarded our nation as strong citadel of Australia in need. We left our dear country, the island of Malta. We left our dear history, our family and friends. We suffered the hardship, we journeyed in danger to come to Australia, the vast lucky land. We carried the passport of the British Crown. We earned our freedom of country and town. Let us enter country and town. We left our dear country, the island of Malta. We're brave, we're hard-working, together we stand. We fight for our rights, but give more than we ask for, and made our new home of this vast lucky land.
Do you remember the day on which you had to have everything packed and you went down to Valletta and got on the ship? And
when we was going to the ship, Grandpa came with us, because none of the women folk had come. I think they were too broken-hearted. And we went to a cafe there, or drink. We had wine, lemonade and wine, port and lemon they called it anyway. And then we had to go to the ship there. It was on the 27th of November, I think it was. And we went on board, and Mum said, oh, I got claustrophobia. I'm not going to go in that cabin. I'm not going in that cabin. She wouldn't go in it, you know. And then my cousin come to see me. And I started crying like anything. I said, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. He said, you have to go, you must go, because you're going to see your father. So anyway, we had to borrow the money from Grandpa's sister. She had do you know the Prince of Wales Hotel? Strada Reale there? Auntie had this big hotel there, and she was well off, you know. And she lent us the passage money. Otherwise, God knows how we would have come here, because Dad wasn't working. And we sent it all back. And we sent the money back to her, and we sent the money back to Grandma, you know, for keeping us, to help her along, and the money to Father's parents. Oh, they all got a bit of it, you know.
Tell me now about about the voyage itself. I'm very interested in it, of course, because it was the first group after the war.
Well, the voyage was like this. We had war brides with us. Many girls out there. If you were single, you would have a bit of fun, I tell you. But anyhow, that's when you're young, you're a bit foolish. But the voyage was extra good, I would say. We used to play the piano, have a sing-song at night together. I gathered them together, and those who could play, even by the ear they play. We give a chance to everyone. Then, through the captain, of course, we used to have a dance. The whole crew, the whole people, the passengers, we have a dance. And those who wants to have a dance, they were entitled to go and have a dance. And other times we had other functions, playing quotes or whatever it is. Well, that's what they had actually, dancing, boxing, playing quotes, playing the log, how far the ships have advanced during the day, the mileage, the knots, the number of knots, housey, something like that. You know, these little things. You can't go beyond certain things, you know.
Did you have to do medical tests and things like that in order to get the passage?
Yes. I had to go to what they call it, the government medical officer. He has to pass you, he has to test you to see if you got any sicknesses or diseases or whatever you suffer from or whatever. You have the police clearance. You won't leave the island unless you are really, clear. Malta is very strict about that.
At any time before the Rangitiki left Malta, did all the passengers get together for any reason? Was there any, like a briefing where the passengers were told what to expect?
I don't remember that, but I know that when we got on the boat, Valletta Harbour, we got on together, and there was someone that came up and gave some talk about, what they expect, how they behave, because some people, unless you have a certain education, you're going to find it hard when you meet people, how to greet them and all that sort of thing. And we were told to help the Maltese people that were there who lacked this sort of, education, how you behave on the table, how they respect the officers of the boat, what they have to do if they need something, how they find the purser, and how they go to the hospital bay of the boat if they need something, whom they have to contact. And we were helping them like that. Myself, Father Casha, which I used to help him in his mass on the boat when he'd say mass, I used to help him,
What was the accommodation like on the Rangitiki?
This ship was a wartime ship. And we were, I wouldn't say really good, but it wasn't bad. We were living in bunks, on top of the others, sort of. That's how we were sleeping. But we never worried about that. We enjoyed it. We used to have parties. It's 11 o'clock, we still have ducks, roast ducks, and we chuck in $1 each, and we have fun and a few drinks, and we still have a sing-song, and the voyage was made very lively. We used to start it, you see. Maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, we're still going until we fall asleep, you see. We didn't know it's daylight. So, many times Father Cachia used to tell me, what's going on in your cabin down there? Oh, I said, you have your sleep. We do. We have our fun.
Cyrenia, it was a real junk. All the boys were in one dormitory, doesn't matter if you're married or not, you know. And all the women and the girls were on the other side of the ship. And it was a real filthy ship. I think the rats actually owned that ship. They used to come through all the pipes, and it was a junk ship. I mean, they used to use anything they could get their hands on to get the migrants out of Australia. I would say in one trip, just Maltese alone, there would easily have been 500 people.
On that?
Yes,
vessel?
yes,
Gee.
which would be all families with little babies, a lot of kids, young women my age, single men coming out, single women coming out to marry somebody here. A lot of different circumstances. We used to go promenade the decks. We used to look at the other people, watch them swimming. But I think we were in a sort of a class on the ship that there was nothing going on except getting together, just talking with other families, kids playing together. I think the displaced persons, as we call them, the war refugees, I think they were in a better class on that ship than we were. I may be wrong, but that's the idea I get.
Were there any musicians at all?
I think there were, and I think there was even a bit of dancing going on. But we never went there. Maybe I wasn't allowed to, but I don't remember going personally.
Were there any Maltese?
Oh,
priests?
naturally. There is always a Maltese priest with every migrant lot.
How did you get to the ship?
There was a big dicer. There was only a few people at a time with your belongings. Personal things we were going to carry with us. And the dicer stopped on near the ship, and we all went up a little rickety stairs. Gee, it was an adventure. I don't remember being sad leaving Malta, because don't forget I had mum and dad and my sister with me.
Yeah.
I didn't leave anybody dear to me then, and I was at that age that I didn't miss anybody. And don't forget I was coming to an adventure, being on a ship the first time. I can remember my country getting smaller and smaller, but it didn't bother me there. But when I think about it now, I could cry. Yeah.
My father was a very strict person, and he wasn't very happy at all about it. But people start wagging, talking about, oh, you let them go, you know, single girls coming to Australia and this and that. But we found out when we got on the boat, actually before we got on the boat, there was a girl coming out here, but her father was already here. She was single, but her father was already here. So her father came first, and she came supposed to live with her father. And also we found other single girls came here without families once we were on the boat. But when we're not on the before we got on that boat, we didn't know there were single girls coming here on their own. And we met them on the boat. Yes, it was very hard to come. And people talked about it, you know, oh, they're going on their own and blah, blah. But, of course, don't forget, we already had my brothers here.
What was the scene at the customs
Oh,
house?
the scene at the customs was everybody crying, everybody leaving, everybody this, husband, perhaps mostly were married women that their husbands were already here. So her mother, perhaps their parents were crying, their aunties, their sisters, everybody screaming, and oh, we'll never see you again, and all this sort of thing. And it was a terrible scene, yes. It was very hard for everybody to bear, yes.
Who was there to say goodbye to you, Josie?
Well, my father, as it happened, he was a very sick man, so he couldn't come and see us. He saw us before we left home, and he gave us his blessing. He says, I'll give you my blessing, and I want you to look after yourself and make sure you keep your honour. Whatever that was at that time, I didn't know. So he really broke down at home. But my mother and my aunties and my uncles were there to see us, yes. And they came down to see us. And of course, Mum, she had a little tear, but not much, because she knew we're doing for our best. She wanted us to do it for our own good. My uncle, one of them, he didn't catch up with us on the land, but he hired a boat. The next minute we see him, as we were on the boat up in the Florentia, we see him screaming his eyes out because he didn't see us before we left. So he caught up with us on the boat and said goodbye. He's on this little boat, and we're up on the little boat. He's yelling his life, he's yelling up, and crying and so on. And he saw us like that. He was very upset to see us going. Yes.
Laurie Armato, based in Trieste. She loaded with some 700 Italians, men, women, and children, plus about another similar number of bloody Germans from Trieste, and got to Malta. And we were the biggest group. We would have been somewhere around 900 or 1,000. And I was the welfare officer in charge of my mob. From there we went to Cyprus. We loaded again another 700 or 800 Greeks. And we left Malta on the 28th of August. So I met with the ship's chaplain, who was an Italian, who didn't speak any other language of any kind, except Italian. And he said to me, God sent, you speak Italian? He said, because I know your people, how religious they are, and I need someone like you, blah, blah, blah. And we became practically brothers, you know.
What was his name, Joe? Do you remember?
I don't recall his name. I recall the name of the barman, but no more Jim. So it was customary, the Maltese in the evening would get together in the lounge room after dinner and say their evening prayers, and mass in the morning. On Sunday there'll be a sermon, so I'll be on the altar with the parish, with the ship's chaplain, translating his sermon into Maltese. It's that way. And, but another episode was a few days after we were on board. The ship's captain said, Giuseppe, he said, I have problems with hearing confession from your people, he said, because they don't speak Italian. He said, as you know, I don't speak English or Maltese. He said, can you think of something that could help? I said, jokingly, you know, I didn't mean, I had no idea he's going to jump onto the bloody suggestion. I said, why don't we type out, you know, a number of common sense in Italian, and I translate them into bloody Maltese. I said, when they kneel down, you give them the list, and they say 2 of this, 3 of that, and 4 of the other, you know. And I was expecting, you know, to say, we're making a joke of this. He said, that's a very inspired idea. He said, we'll do this. So we commandeered the only typewriter on board ship at the Perseus. He put them down in Italian, I translated them down on Maltese. The funny side of life.
And it worked.
It worked. But during that voyage, we had some beautiful experiences. No Maltese on board ship spoke Greek. No Greek, needless to say, spoke bloody Maltese on board ship. But there was this camaraderie because of the Second World War. So you would have occasions where a German would get involved in a fist fight with a Maltese, and the Greek would look at this. He takes one look, he doesn't care what the fight is about, and he'd get on the side of the Maltese. Or a Greek having a go at an Italian, or vice versa, the Maltese would go to the aid of the Greek. It was an unwritten understanding that they are they and we are we.
What were the numbers like, Joe?
Well, I would say we were somewhere around 3,500 people.
Oh, okay.
This was, don't forget, a former hospital ship from the First World War, German, which was handed over to Italy as part of the war reparations from the First World War. Anyway, as you would recall, in those days, Malta's National Day was the 8th of September, and we organized a committee to on board ship, to organize sports and one thing and another. Amongst other things, we thought it would be an idea to organize a celebration celebrating our National Day by having a ball. Half a dozen Maltese who played various instruments, so we had our own band. They had their own instruments with them. So at the breakfast, I told the captain, I was an Italian. The ship's crew, incidentally, was Italian officers and Yugoslav crew. And again, most of the Yugoslavs were on our side, fighting against the Italians and the Germans. So we had a certain camaraderie here, even with the crew. And at breakfast, I mentioned to the captain, I said, my organizing committee would like to organize a ball, after dinner on the 8th of September. Can we have your permission to do so, make use of the ship's facilities? Yes, of course, he said. I said, what does Malta celebrate on the 8th of September? I said, we celebrate the defeat of the Turks in 1565 and the defeat of fascist Italy in 1943. I told him the truth. And, one can turned into all sorts of colors. He was a man of about maybe 50. I suppose he did his service for his country in the Second World War. He said, you have the cheat, he said, to ask me, an Italian, captain of an Italian ship, to celebrate the defeat of Italy. I said, you asked me what we celebrate? I'm telling you. I said, I further advise you that if you would hold permission, I said, some of the boys would get drunk. I said, and you're likely to have trouble on board bloody ship, He said, if you give me a guarantee, I said, I'll give you nothing. I said, but I'll do my best. We have a night, there won't be any problem. I said, you would kindly, if you would like to, be our official guest. I will invite the other welfare officers, the Greek, the Italian, and the German, which I did. The night went to 100%, went off smoothly. That's all there is to it. Funny part of it is that within weeks, these Germans and Italians and Maltese and Greeks who fought each other on board bloody ship simply because they were what they were, by birth and by nationality. You meet them at General Motors, for instance, the best of bloody mates, because all of a sudden, within days, they find that they had one thing in common, that they were all bloody foreigners in Australia, and there was more in common between the Greek and the Italian than there was between the Greek and the English-speaking person, or the Italian English-speaking person. When I look back, it was a good trip. I used to make a joke. In fact, at the end of the trip, I used to say to them, everybody complaining, when are we going to get there? When are we going to get there? I said, what's the hurry? You're doing nothing here, eating and sleeping, and thinking, what do you want to get there for?
It was quite a dilapidated ship. The conditions in it were very cramped, and I think everybody more or less got quite claustrophobic on it. But I have very happy memories of my time on the ship. I can remember a number of very specific incidents that happened. I remember, for example, coming through the Suez Canal. We were one of the last ships to come through the Suez Canal before the Suez Canal was closed in '56. And I recall seeing camels for the first time, people riding camels along the side of the Suez, which I thought was very strange. Then, after going through the Suez Canal, I remember people making a lot of commotion about sighting sharks. We would have been in the Red Sea at the time. I couldn't understand what all the commotion was about. We could see these fins in the water, but I didn't know what the fins stood for. I remember people pointing at them, and I thought that's all very strange. I remember when we stopped at Port Said and at Aden, boats coming out to the side of the ship, and people throwing down money to the boats, and the people in the boats then sending up various wares that people bought. In fact, my parents bought some items there. I know they bought a photo album which has got on its cover in sort of traditional wear there, traditional leather, sort of a picture of the pyramids and the Sphinx. They bought one of those. I remember Mum bought a handbag which has long since vanished, although Dad still has the photo album. After we went through the Suez, I remember coming into the harbour at Colombo and Ceylon, and I had an accident there. In fact, from my recollections, there was a very large breakwater, long breakwater, and the ship actually had to come inside the breakwater. I remember running from one side of the ship to the other to try to get a glimpse of everything as it was as we were entering the harbour, and I slipped and hit my head on the metal decking and got a huge lump, what they call a bundella, which remained very painful for a long period of time. It was very embarrassing having this huge lump sort of protruding at the back of my head. My father was very concerned about it, that I may have injured myself in some way permanently. At Ceylon, I also recall there a number of the natives clambering up the side of the boat. They had a police guard, I recall, a native police guard on the stairway, at the top of the stairway that was down the side of the ship leading down into Ceylon, leading into Colombo itself. But these natives were throwing ropes up the front part of the ship and clambering up and doing trade for anything substantial to get their hands on with, for in exchange for things like ebony elephants and sort of little carvings and so forth. And I remember on one occasion, while we were of an evening in the Indian Ocean, going up on deck in the evening, my father and a whole lot of people were very concerned, staring up at the moon, and didn't quite know what was going on, but apparently what was happening was, it was quite obvious we were going around in circles because of the positioning of the moon, and people cottoned onto the fact that we weren't heading in a straight line and were worried what was going on. Apparently there'd been some breakdown in one of the motors, and that we were actually drifting for some time, and some concern being expressed about that. A memorable event during the voyage was the fact that I made my first Holy Communion along with about 20 other boys and girls on the voyage out. I remember my father taking me to see the parish priest back in MC there with a request that I be allowed to make my first communion in Malta before coming to Australia, and the parish priest denying the request because he felt I was too young to do it, given that I would have been about 5 at the time. This would have been late 1955. On the way out, there were quite a number of people about my age who still hadn't made their first communion. There was a Maltese chaplain on the ship, and apparently a number of parents requested that we be allowed to make our first communion, so we all received our instruction and made our first confessions and our first communion on the ship. Coming into Fremantle, the first impression I have of that is of an evening, it would have been the evening before we actually arrived, of people actually gathering on the foredeck and all in great anticipation, peering endlessly into the darkness until eventually a light flickered, and this light grew stronger and stronger. What they're actually seeing, I would surmise now, although I wasn't aware of it at the time, would have been the first indication of some kind of a lighthouse pointing the way to Fremantle, and this would have been the first vision that we would have had of Australia, and actually reaching Australia at the time.
We got up early in the morning because we heard about the Sydney Bridge, for instance. And of course, coming through the Heads early in the morning is something beautiful. Really, really, we were struck with that. And of course, everybody was on deck and wondering whether are we going under the bridge or going somewhere else. And when we were approaching that bridge, we are going under. And so, oh look, we're almost touching it, and all this sort of thing, you know. And yes, it was quite exciting going under the bridge. We ended up at Woolloomooloo. So how we went that way first, I don't know. There were, I wouldn't say thousands, but hundreds of people waiting. There we could see it all from the deck. And some already started to wave and things like that. Of course, I didn't know anybody at that time, but we were very, very excited about arriving in Australia. And of course, when we finally disembarked, we met this Mrs. Gregg who did the accommodation for us, and of course they took us home to Balmain. My first experience, so I said, looked funny at the time, but didn't quite understand it, was when we actually first arrived in Fremantle on the way. Because there, on board, came officials of the Commonwealth Bank and the New South Wales Bank. And this, of course, in those days, I won't say they were vultures, but they were trying to get customs straight away, as soon as they got onto the ship. And that was apparently very common.
May I bring a lot of things of food, like we had a big trunk like this, and I used to buy like tins of tomato paste and things of what's called tuna. And this lady of the shop, she used to tell me, there is no shops in Australia. Because I put my mind how people told me there is nothing there, and I thought, it's better. And we was lucky they not opened this trunk, because was a lot of things in it, like tins, food. We packed a lot of things with us, things of the kitchen, of like, of the beds, you know, sheets and towels, and of course everything I had. We get big boxes packed, you know, and I make a lot of clothes for the kids, more to have a lot to they wear, you know. Now we get a lot of things with us, not furniture. We get the primus and the other spiritual with 3. I still have 2 of them. I have one in the garage there. Yes, in the garage. And then I have another one in the beach house. I have a beach house, you know, and we have one up there too.
Considered the idea of
well, it was 1947. That's when my brother Joe, he started to think about coming to Australia. And between him and my father, the eager to come to Australia, it was really getting into me. But apart from that, the reason that I came to Australia was that I couldn't see any future for my family. I had 3 boys and a daughter at the time, and I couldn't see any future for them. So I decided to come to Australia according to the information we had, that it's a big country, there's a lot of opportunities, prosperities, and you name it. It was there in propaganda.
What belongings did you bring with you?
We had all the clothes we had back home, we brought them with us. We had some toys for the kids, wasn't that much. And we had quite a bit of food because, well, the wives were afraid that we was going to be sort of cut out from the rest of the community. People used to say more like, you go there, you might be in the bush, you might have problems to go to the shops and all this sort of things. So we came well and truly prepared. Everything necessary for life, except meat, of course. But thin food and powdered things, non-perishable, make it short, non-perishable food, we brought them with us.
Did you bring any tools of your trade?
I did brought my tools, the ones I had. And of course I didn't know what I was going to face up to here. But the tools I brought with me, it was valuable here. I had to bought more when I came here. The spirit level, the gauging trowels, I bought two of them. With this pig pinchers, a couple of pinchers. And mainly that was the most important thing for me, to have them handy. Some of the tools I had, they didn't know here how to use them. So it was very valuable for me. And if I didn't brought them with me, I wouldn't be able to get them here. I still got one. This piece of tool, it was to bore holes into the tiles, which here they didn't knew anything about boring a hole into the tile. As a matter of fact, the first hole I had to bore into the tile, I was working at Midland Abattoirs, and quite a few of the plasters who was working up there, they came around me to see me doing it, and they all laughed. They thought it was a big joke. But when they saw me do the holes I required to do without breaking the tiles, they were surprised, and they wanted to know how we would do it. I said, well, you saw me doing it. And the special tool I had, they tried to make them, try them themselves, and they couldn't succeed. It is a technique how it's done. We call it Maltese. It's Martellina. It's like a pig. One side is pointy and the other one is flat.
That's why I got 6 children.
Get your head, that's wrong.
Yeah, I'm taking it easy. I'm taking it.
I get you one beer.
I'll grab the one I had.
And it's still there.
And this is Ronnie's favourite.
Cheers, Fred.
Ronnie's favourite.
Hey, Joe. That's what the parson said, you know. Said, I see.
Why did you write the song?
I think I thought that if I write this song, the kids will always remember it, and they tell their children about it. How much we suffer to come in this country. Otherwise, would be forgotten what happened to us. I tell you how I wrote it. I'm washing the clothes in the laundry. Then I said, I should write what happened to us, on that boat. And I started. Ronnie said to me, as soon as you think about it, go and write it straight away. That's what he said. Anyway, I did that. And believe me or not, you know how long it took me to write it? 2 days. Because I know exactly what happened to us. So there was no trouble to write it.
Skaubryn, sabi khafna om el-gbar, konna tisamia fuq, konna kbar u anki żgħar,
il-vapur konnina ġimaw imbagġew jatuna l-bxara biex kulħadd attent joqgħod għax il-vapur ġratlu il-ħsara x'ħin din il-bxara smajna aħna konna ġolga bina sabiex aħna norqdu kmini għax in-nas kien għamel bina. Imbat jien il-bib mort niftaħ u rajt in-nies jiġru il-port kollha bdew jibku u jgħidu li l-vapur qed jieħu l-ħruq jien it-tfal u r-raġel tiegħi tilajna fuq biex insalvar għax bid-duħan li beda diħel lanqas nimxu ma stajna naraw mela kif aħna fuq tilajna għax isfel konna sa nitgaw bil-ġenni sejna salva u amor ma kenna xej biex salva umbat ir-raġel għalli ħussib it-tfal armati telefon ħalli jina isfer ninżel u forsi nara inġibon. Kif ipprova jinżel isfel beda jaħbat mal-ħita għal xejn ma sata jara kull kien mimlenu ħal reġa ġib fejn il-familja beda jiġri ġiri bla għalli jgħaw nittama u falla u namlu kif jamlu in-nies mela mbagħad id-dajjes nizlu biex kulħadd fuqhom imur aħna tlajna fuq l-ewwel waħda biex naħarbu mill-vapur waqt li konna ġewwa d-dajsa iżjed beda jaqbad il-vapur id-dajsa ma stajniex insuqu la kella mqadet wanqas motur. Domna ħafna fuq id-dajsa nitolbu u niddama bdejna lem u law ninħarsu biex forsi vapur naraw wara tliet sigħat ġodda issa rajna daw l-risa bil-mol għalu li kir-risa tanker u sa jkollu joqgħod il-bol id-dajjes l-oħra kienu tajba Frau tanker med nåve Dauna wara shul shintala Okul hat beda yistre Idai satana ba'et wifa Ahna shart dayna nara Bdayna namlu
Maltese Voices Down Under was a 2-disc CD produced by Barry York for the Europe-Australia Institute at Victoria University of Technology in Melbourne, in cooperation with Kevin Bradley of the National Library of Australia in 1998. And it consists of excerpts from oral history interviews recorded for the National Library with Maltese migrants of the vintage from 1916 to 1958. The excerpts are interspersed with music performed by Maltese musicians who were recorded by the National Library in Sydney and in Melbourne. Special thanks go to the musicians, guitarists Fred Cachia, Gary Camilleri, Manuel Casha, Pulo and Joe Xerri, and mandolinist Laurie Armato.